This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So the fork-tongued Michael Cohen was on with Clinton Foundation donor Zero. We were talking about that last hour. GMA this morning doing more of his shape-shifting, trying to rehabilitate his image. He's not the villain here. He chose darkness over light, misplaced loyalty, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. It's all well and good to cover Michael Cohen. It was a decision that President Trump made to associate himself with this low life, and so you lie down with dogs, as the saying goes. Not in Poor Richard's Almanac, though, is this other matter. Jim Comey's testimony last week, for example, in addition to what we now know about how the Flynn interview was set up, in addition to Strzok and Page text messages missing. And Martha McCallum over at Fox News, an actual serious person, sat down with Trey Gowdy, almost a bit of an exit interview for Trey Gowdy, and Trey Gowdy held forth and did not hold back on one Jim Comey and his Mr. Smith Goes to Washington routine.
You know, Martha, I was disappointed in what he didn't remember, but I was much more disappointed in what he never knew. The head of the FBI has the campaign of a presidential candidate under investigation. He never read the initiation document, didn't know that Peter Strzok had signed it. Still to this day doesn't know that it makes reference to the Trump campaign. He just thinks it's four individuals, doesn't know who Christopher Steele is, doesn't know much about Bruce Orr, knows nothing about efforts to either corroborate or contradict the dossier, doesn't agree that there's a duty to produce exculpatory information.
And gets a complete pass on all of the above. I mean, it's a great way to put it, how Trey Gowdy did, which is to say more disappointed, more troubled by what he never knew rather than what he says he doesn't remember. And he's saying that tongue fully in cheek. Right. Gowdy went on also to address something that Comey dismissed out of hand after his testimony last week, the idea there was anything approximating abuse of the FISA process, the FISA court.
You know, I asked him, when did you learn that the DNC was funding the Oppo research into Trump? Oh, I don't know. As if it doesn't matter. Well, if you know and you're not telling a judge, I mean, don't you think it's relevant? Hey, my political enemies are responsible for everything I'm giving you, or a third of what I'm giving you. A judge wants to know that. So Comey is one of the best I've ever seen at always being right in his mind. And it doesn't matter if he's a universe of one. When you write a book about ethics and morality, that in and of itself is a fairly high opinion of yourself thing to do. Comey just thinks he's always right, and it doesn't matter if Horowitz thinks he's wrong, and it doesn't matter if everyone else concludes he did wrong. He knows better, so that's what it's like to interview an amnesiac with incredible hubris.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because I saw Incredible Hubris open for Amnesiac at the Aragon Ballroom in 87.
Hey-o!
Thank you very much.
It's a good show. You still remember. Yeah.
For more on this topic and others, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Bret Baier. He is the anchor of Special Report, of course, Fox News, 5 p.m. Chicago time, weekdays. The book, 3 Days in Moscow, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire. Bret, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So, I don't know. Which you want to tackle first? You want to tackle Cohen, or you want to tackle the other side of the house, which, a few outlets and a few reporters like Martha McCallum are actually paying attention to?
Yeah, it is stark. We often talk about stories that, don't get picked up in the mainstream media. This is a giant story that you would think would be an easy, touch the other side, balance things out, but it doesn't even get talked about. And that is strange, and there's a lot there. I talked to a former federal prosecutor last night at one of the gazillion Christmas parties you have to go to in Washington, and he said, and he is not a political guy, he said that it really stinks on the other side of this coin. I mean, yes, the prosecutors and the U.S. attorneys in the Southern District of New York are writing it in a way that this potentially is a problem, despite all the FEC questions about campaign finance violations. But the other side, he said, when the FBI and how it responded and how it acted with Michael Flynn, James Comey and his amnesia, he said it really stinks. And if you had a Bob Mueller and his prosecutors putting as much focus as they are on Trump on the other side, he said you would produce a lot of action.
Right, and so, I mean, and the question, I guess, is what's the handicapping inside the Beltway, since you're forced to go to all these Christmas parties, maybe you've heard, with respect to the incoming Attorney General. Is William Barr going to reshuffle the deck and attach some seriousness to the look-see at the other side of the house, as you were describing it, and also the evidence that's been presented, like the Horowitz reports, the referral on McCabe, are those going to be revisited? Is there any indication that the Department of Justice under new leadership may take those issues up?
I think it's very possible. Barr has talked about that publicly before, and there is according to this federal prosecutor I talked to last night, is a growing contingent inside the DOJ and inside the, justice overall that says, listen, if you're going to do one, you have to do the other because justice is blind. And right now, a lot of people are turning a blind eye to all of the strange things on how that investigation unfolded.
Yeah, it looks like right now. It seems like Lady Justice is peeking below the blindfold a little bit, and so we're going to see. I wanted to get your take as well on the decision by the Senate yesterday to essentially withdraw support for the proxy war in Yemen between Saudi Arabia and Iran. The implications of that for Trump's principled realist foreign policy in the Middle East.
I know the administration was making an effort to prevent that, and they feel like they're making headway with negotiations with Iran and Yemen and Saudi Arabia when it comes to dealing with that situation. But it's an interesting bedfellows here getting together. Mike Lee and Bernie Sanders were fighting for this because they feel it's Congress's duty, and they've been long boxed out of anything when it comes to war powers. So Yemen is one of these situations where it's obviously a humanitarian crisis, and Congress acted. I think you'll probably see like that challenging this president's foreign policy.
Khashoggi recently was put on Time Magazine's Person of the Year award, along with other media outlets that they claim have been under attack. Do you still feel that that's narrative that is still going on? As a member of the media?
Killing journalists?
Yeah. No. But I'm just saying, the media in general. I mean, I know they talked about the Gazette where their employees were killed and one of the sales associates was killed as well.
Yeah. Listen, it's a dangerous region. And if you look, Turkey has been really loud about Saudi Arabia and this Khashoggi thing. Turkey has the most journalists in jail currently in the world. And so it's a little ironic that Erdogan is out there saying, it's horrific what happened with Saudi Arabia. That said, the Saudis really screwed up. And this is a major, major problem. And hence Congress's action. And I think, other countries are going to have similar action towards the Saudis.
Well, and just speaking of consistency on the topic, how about our virtue signaling institutions of higher education, like, I don't know, my alma mater, Northwestern Georgetown, a report by the Financial Times. The top two recipients of largesse funding from Gulf states, the total of $2.2 billion from Gulf states to U.S. universities since the beginning of 2012, with Saudi Arabia representing $580 million of that $2.2 billion. So will we see Georgetown and Northwestern and others divest from their Saudi Arabian cash?
I doubt it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money being flown around.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's some reporting out there. The Daily Beast has a piece that says the special counsel, once it gets through this Russia charge, and whatever Mueller comes up with or doesn't, is going to explore what they've found as far as Middle Eastern pumping money into the political system. Now, if that happens and the special counsel takes a detour that way, Washington might as well just fess up, because there's so much money from all of those Middle Eastern countries, especially Saudi Arabia, in Washington on both sides of the aisle, that it will be a big moment.
Start at the Clinton Foundation. Hey, let me ask you about the status of Trump zeroing in on a new chief of staff and where you think that stands at present.
The president met last night with Chris Christie at the White House. I think it was his second meeting. I think that in temperament and job, that Chris Christie is kind of the guy that would be perfect, minus the fact that he put Jared Kushner's father in jail. So, the family dynamics there may prevent that from happening.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Maybe not. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe he does it anyway.
Hey, Michael Cohen making the rounds now. He did his first sit down with George Stephanopoulos. Are you guys efforting him to try and get his side of the story, or are you going to move on?
We'll use George's sound bites. No, I'm sure we're asking for an interview, but I think he's saying the same. I think he's saying the same stuff. I'm not sure he's illuminating anything new, but I do think that the special counsel is trying to get some water in the stone when it comes to Michael Cohen, and part of this sentencing may be to cooperate more fully than he has already on Mueller's investigation. I think we're still weeks away from a conclusion.
Yeah, your Fox News contributor Jonathan Turley, GW law professor, I think, had the definitive line on Michael Cohen in terms of the D.C. press corps coverage. The idea this is some sort of fall from grace. You cannot fall from a place you never occupied. Bret Baier, Fox News special report anchor, weekdays, 5 p.m. Chicago time. The book, 3 Days in Moscow, Ronald Reagan and the Fall of the Soviet Empire. Bret, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
You too.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.